And welcome everyone to Religion Zero, episode 7, right? Episode 7. And I'm joined, of course, by Bobby, Brooke, Conk, and of course, we have a guest today, Abuamerican. We are, of course, talking about just the fucked up world that is religion and religion. How the religion, basically. Whoop, did I freeze there? Oh no, I froze there for a sec. No, just the way religion is nowadays with everything that's going on. But I know we all wanted to talk about real quick. We don't want to. I know it's kind of relevant. We're talking about family structures in religion, and I know the guys are bringing up that there's definitely something to be said about how family is going with all the calm and tranquility that's in the world right now. Right, guys? It's pretty calm and tranquil out there.
Nobody's cars are on fire.
Nothing's going on at all. Nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
On fire for the White House? What do you mean?
Yeah.
Square. Yes,
exactly. Because I'm actually, since I'm hosting this week, I'm here in Minnesota for any of our viewers that don't know. So everything's fine here. Nothing, we don't have both of our largest cities burning to the ground at all.
It doesn't look like a war zone then.
Oh, it's what is it? Some people in the National Guard who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan say it's actually worse. It looks worse here than it looks in some of those areas.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a war zone over there. I haven't gone anywhere near there. The curfew was last night and the night before. And they're still trying to figure things out over there. But I mean, I don't know. We're talking about so I mean, I know there can be some talk about how family connects to it, and some of you guys were bringing up some good points. I wanted to give because Bobby was saying something about you there, Bobby? Oh, I think he froze.
Have we lost Bobby? Is he in the
that sly smile? Maybe he's just good at miming.
But now actually I'll get Corey's take then. So Bobby was touching on like how like fatherlessness is probably kind of not making this happen, but definitely being the cause of this. Oh, there he goes. Oh, we'll get him back in a sec. Oh, there we are.
Is he back?
There he is. Hey.
Yeah.
You
pardon the
title, bro.
We got you.
He resurrected on the 3rd minute.
Thai internet strikes again.
Yeah. So what were you saying at the beginning of the show then, Bobby, about like what you think is the cause of all this peaceful protesting?
Yeah, I mean, the frustrating thing about me regarding the state of Black affairs in America, or I would even say in the West in general, is a misdiagnosis. Like all the leftist commentary seems to focus on the effects and instead of the cause. It focuses on the weeds instead of the actual root. And I feel like the underlying cause and root of all the problems plaguing the Black community are fatherlessness. Like they can be and there's multiple reasons why we have fatherlessness. Like not to go off too much of a tangent, but we are talking about family structures. Like I encourage anybody that's interested in the topic to look up the phrase "man in the house rule." I'll even throw it down in the chat when I get a second. But there was a rule that the government invented that started with the Great Society that I believe broke up the Black family when the modern day welfare state was created. That basically said that if there's a man in the house, the woman is going to be worse off financially. She actually is she is financially incentivized to be impregnated by as many babies as possible without the man in the house. She gets more food stamps, more WIC coupons, more Section 8, more this, more that, as long as the man who got her pregnant is not living in the house with her. And to me, the state became the new husband and the new baby daddy, and that's what broke up the Black family. A lot of men in our space talk about how, women self-destruct in the absence of a strong male influence. Well, the same thing is for men too. Like, masculine influence has universal healing and guiding appeal to it. So when that's missing, you grow up with people that you see burning buildings down to the ground, flipping cars during riots and things like that. So to me, the issue is fatherlessness, and that's why we're seeing a lot of what we're seeing. And until we fix that, we're going to continue to whack away at these weeds with these family-destroying, useless liberal programs that aren't getting anywhere except making black people much worse off than they were before the Great Society started. And if you think about it, there's been a $10 trillion transfer in wealth between the have and the have-nots, and the have-nots are worse off than prior to that transfer. Like, what does that tell us? So, long story short, that's why I think a lot of this stuff's happening.
Now, you have a guest on, like I said before, we have Abuamerican on. Now, you're in Germany, right, Abu?
Indeed, yeah, I am.
I'm looking in the background. Is that a bedroom or something that's behind you, or
it's a loft? It's a loft that's up above my apartment. So it's like I got an apartment.
Oh, okay.
Upstairs, and that just leads to it.
So how are things over there in Germany then, with all this going on?
Man, it's quiet. I mean, I can happily say that it's quite quiet here. But I was actually so shocked to see that like these protests actually spread to London. I don't think they'll spread to Germany. Yeah. I don't think we have the what do you call it, the popular support for such thing here. There's just not that many black people here, so not many people are going to go out and start protesting.
Or maybe you guys just don't have the chutzpah.
Yeah, that too. But in London, you have a very large black population. So I mean, to a very micro degree, we can understand the discontent. Not very much, because they don't have these type of problems. They don't have U.S. problems in London. So solidarity with black people, I understand, but in general, like the problems they don't have. So in Germany, I don't think anything's going to spread here, but that did surprise me this morning.
Yeah. I was speaking to that because I'm actually out. I'm in Essex, so I'm just north of London, but I work in the city and stuff like that. So yeah, there is protests in Trafalgar. I was saying there are two protests going on today. One in Trafalgar Square, which is a solidarity movement. A lot of young people, a lot of young kids, university students and stuff like that. And then there's like a freedom movement that's taking place in Hyde Park. I think one of my friends is hoping to get arrested out there today, so that I'll hear that story later this evening. Yeah, what else are you gonna do on a Sunday in the lockdown?
You're just trying to get some free metal bracelets. That's all.
Yeah, some street cred, man.
Yeah, here you get to keep them after
the podcast world.
But Bobby was actually onto something right there. I agree 100% with him. Like, the deconstruction of the African American family and community by removing fathers from the house has been just massively destructive to the African American community in general. And we've been looking at the Black American community. It's been like an ongoing matriarchy for 40 plus years. And so when you really look at societies with Black America making up approximately 13 to 14% of the American population, Black America is the canary in the coal mine for what's going to happen to other ethnicities if guys don't get their stuff together in terms of like families. Can it be saved at this point? Who knows? But there definitely needs to be something to happen. Something needs to happen because African America is like the micro and greater society is the macro. And so it's a reflection of what's going to happen. It is without question.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And it's a double plague if you think about it, because the absence of a father, that's just as bad. Well, some would even argue, and I think I might agree, that the presence of a single mother could even be worse than the absence of a father, because I think there's studies that have been done that if you look at children raised by single fathers are much more balanced, much more functional than children raised by single mothers. And this isn't to hate women. This isn't to be misogynistic or anything like that. But the fact is, if I had to choose, it's a false choice because it shouldn't be a choice. We should have the complementarity of feminine and masculine. That's what we need to be well-rounded humans. But if I was presented with the false choice to be raised by a single mother or a single father, I would choose the single father. Again, not because I hate women, but who would you rather be raised by? Somebody who runs on 80% emotions and hormones and maybe 20% logic, or somebody that runs on 100% logic if they're the right kind of guy? I'll take the person that's built to run on logic any day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, not everybody's going to make that same choice, but I think you're spot on. Even for myself, like I was raised by my single mom, right? So my dad left and everything else like that. And now many years later, trying to recapture those lost, male virtues. I'm coming to it very late in life. Like I was in my mid 30s when I kind of discovered those needs and stuff like that. So I completely agree. It is a systemic problem, and it's spreading. I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean.
Nice.
So,
My mom's from there.
What's that?
I said my mother's from Trinidad, Port of Spain.
Oh, give him a best, man.
Oh,
You know,
nice.
tell us said hi. The dynamic. It's not in America. It's in the Caribbean, and the same problem is affecting the community out there as well. So, Abu, you're absolutely right that it is spreading, and even out here in the UK, there have been recent books that have come out about how it's the welfare state, and all of these things have created for the first time intergenerational dependency on the state, where, you know, the 3 and 4 generations are not working, they're just collecting welfare. And it's not just in the black community, it's spreading all over. So you're quite right in your assessment. I completely agree.
Yeah. I was going to say for my quick hot takes, I was telling the guys right before this, but I personally was involved in the Ferguson protests, and I was there when they were doing their riots as well. So if you guys remember the Mike Brown, that was the hands up, don't shoot situation in St. Louis suburb of Ferguson. And when I got there, I learned a lot very quickly, and it like doubled down how much I hate mainstream media because what I saw there was not what was on the TV, you know. If I personally haven't been to any of this, like I'm not in Minneapolis or Atlanta or any of the other big places that are going on right now, but I'm seeing a lot of similarities in that this isn't just one crazy mob. There is at least 2 or 3 parties there. There are the people who are actually rioting, looting, and going unguided. But there are also a sense of protesters in the community that are actually like trying to stop those guys. And you don't see that very much on mainstream media. You just see the fires and the crazy and the, you know, the riot tear gas and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, from the civilian position, there's definitely at least 2 different parties there. And so I learned very fast, like, don't bundle them together because they have very different agendas. You'd be surprised when I was there. When I talked to the community leaders in Ferguson, they said the people that were like throwing the first stones and breaking stuff, you know, and they burnt, like the big infamous one there is they completely burned down a Quick Trip, which is the holy place of all gas stations. We treat our Quick Trips very seriously here. It's like in and out for other people, but ours is Quick Trip, a gas station, and we treat those with high respect. So like, nobody would burn down a Quick Trip here. Like, that's evidence number 1. Quick Trip is sacred. I literally have a Quick Trip coffee in solidarity right now. But all the community leaders said, yeah, we didn't even know who those people are. They don't even live here, right? The people that throw in the first stones. And I mean, you'll see, I recommend people to not watch mainstream media coverage, but like go around and try to find all the phone cameras because you'll see a lot different of what's actually going on, right? There's like, obviously, like people are still burning and looting and stuff, but there is another party there. I think people don't understand. And so, I mean, saying that, I think there is a time and place for civil unrest and rioting and all of that. I mean, last year, a lot of people were praising Hong Kong for doing this exact thing. But the main difference is that Hong Kong was organized and they had a reason, right? It wasn't recklessness for recklessness' sake. It was a complete agenda. They're trying to stop, you know, going back into the communist state, right? And all of us here were applauding that, the whole Free Hong Kong movement, all of that. And I think that was all last summer, right? Is when it was really big. And we were watching that and we were supporting them, you know, from the other side. But the reason this is different is because it's unguided. And I think that goes a lot into what Bobby was saying. Like, the role of a father really is guidance. So how I see moms is they usually love or show affection through covering or hand-holding or, you know, trying to cover the baby and try to protect it from the outside world. That's kind of their default mode. Like, and dads are different because, you know, the stereotype of, oh, a kid's learning to ride a bike and he scrapes his knee. The dad goes, you know, good job, try again. And the mom says, oh my God, why would you do that? He's going to die. Right? You know? And it's those 2 different parenting energies of that. And then the problem is if you're a male and you have no other male influence and you're only getting that mother influence, you're either going to be a super mama's boy or you're going to rebel to the opposite extreme with no guidance, right? And that's where a lot of this like gang mentality comes in, is because a lot of the gangs I saw in St. Louis and a lot of the people doing this were just kids making it up as I go. And I don't know about you guys, but if I was completely on my own at 17 or 18 and I was the only male, like I would have a pretty screwed up view of masculinity, right?
You wouldn't have
You
a
know
view
what
at
I mean?
all.
Yeah. If you and your other 17 and 18-year-old peers are your only male influence, that's going to go out of whack pretty damn fast, right? And I think that's kind of what we're seeing here. And I also wanted to point out that at the Ferguson community, like it was not about white on black crime or black on white crime. It was the black community versus the system, right? It didn't matter specifically that it was a white officer shooting a black kid. It was the black kid was taken down by a system, and there wasn't proper procedure, and there wasn't proper, any kind of consequences or punishment for the officer, right? And then that this is now a common theme where no matter what, they're kind of always getting the short end of the stick. So it wasn't a black versus white race war at all. The people who were saying that weren't even part of the community. They were very on, the black solidarity and the black people trying to reform and change the system, so to speak. And I think that's a way more noble goal, right?
Well, that's the thing is over here, it's so split up and unguided that everyone is trying to kind of grasp at whatever they can to try to seem more noble than the other group. From all the posts that I'm seeing, so I have like, anything from like high school classmates to just people I know that are in that area, and I try to keep a pretty wide, diverse, like politically just group of people that I'm like can kind of look at what they're posting, and it's a mess. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and try to like, play the, I don't know if they would call it white splaining, but, but I'm me being half Chinese, and I'm looking at it, and like I'll see someone that's like, they're posting everything that I'm seeing. A lot of them seeing that's posted is a lot of like trying to seek credibility because, like there was a picture that said, here's the Amish that showed up to the protest. It's serious when the Amish showed up. There's another one that was like some guy went to a protest dressed as Batman. It's serious when Batman showed up. Like another one was, I found this one Asian person that like speaks for all Asians in Minnesota right now that, they're totally for us. And I'm like, well, don't start speaking for everybody now. Like, and then other groups like, we're like, there was reports, so all the rioting and looting that's going on. Well, they found out that there was possibly some like right-wing groups. They said there was KKK, white supremacist groups that were at the protest. And they're trying to say because of that, therefore all the rioting and looting is their fault. And then there's like the right-wing people that are saying, it's all the Antifa, left-wing, Marxist types. They're there. So it's all their fault. And so no one's really taking responsibility. They said, no, all the first protesters need to go home and be safe. It's not their fault at all. They didn't do anything wrong. Then there's all these crazy conspiracies about how like there was one of the first looters was a cop. There's all these cops that are being found out to be like infiltrating the protests. I don't know if you guys see that. I've seen that. Yeah.
You're talking about the AutoZone video, right?
Well, there's the AutoZone video, but then there's a lot of videos and footage that they're finding right now of like cops that are undercover trying to trace this. Now, if they're tracing and stuff, I get that, but it's just there's no clear direction to this. There's no one who's really taking ownership on any of this. And it's just a mess, there was a whole thing I read up on how like a lot of these looters, when they asked them like, they pretty much asked them like, why are you looting? And it came down to just being opportunistic. It didn't really have much with like, we're sticking it to the man, we're really trying to get a message out there. It's like, no, I mean, yeah, there was that at first, but now it's just the situation people are in. It's like, well, I can get a TV from Target.
And it's crazy how you would think that they would hit a different establishment. I mean, most of these people claim to be bleeding heart liberals, And Target is the last place you think they'd hit, because Target is where they let the transgenders, use the little girl's room. So you would think Target would be one of the protected classes, but I guess it's not. So
Well, I mean, if anything, go to Walmart.
exactly. Good old Arkansas boys.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys saw, like, just because people are thinking, it's all supposed to mean something. It all has this like real greater cause to it, and then you see these pictures. They'll get these like pictures of like a group of black guys like trying to break down a cash register. I don't know if you guys saw this one. So there's one where the like 4 or 5 kids were at a cash register like trying to break it with a hammer, and then in the background there was like some white guy with a box of Legos like walking away like trying to steal it. And it's like a lot of it's just opportunism. So
yeah, that's what I was saying.
Can I jump in with
they're
a
not
really,
part of the protest. They're just capitalizing, right?
Yeah.
Can I jump in with a real unpopular opinion? I've been actually looking at this, and it's kind of hard to make sense out of it, and I don't think we really are ever going to make sense out of it. But I'm going to say something that's really unpopular. We really couldn't expect less of what's going on right now because, like you said, there's no direction and there's no structure. Mm-hmm. And the few times that there were people who had a direction and structure and were protesting peacefully, and I'm not a fan of this guy, but I'm going to mention him. Colin Kaepernick is one example. They tore that guy apart, and he was kneeling at. So when someone does something peacefully, he's torn down. When people do something violent, they're torn down. And really, the problem, which is Black deaths in America, that's never addressed. What's addressed is like how the people are protesting. You're protesting peacefully, you're a bad guy. You're protesting violently, you're a bad guy. And so nothing is left but discontent. And the few times that there is someone who actually takes a stance, which is non-hostile and violent, media eats that guy alive. And I'm only bringing Kaepernick up because he's the most, vivid memory that I have of guys that were actually trying to do something. And let's say he became the eye or the face of like protest. I don't think he'd be out supporting violent protests because the guy spent year or more kneeling at football games. And we don't see him out here throwing rocks right now on the street or anything. That would be big news. So, where do they go when those are your options? It's like, what, just shut up and take it? It's a kind of tough call. At the same time, I'm a guy, I'm all about, I come from a military background, structure, order, chaos. You just can't have that. That's not something I can support whatsoever. So it's like, what do we do? Which brings me to the next unpopular opinion. And this is going to be a really unpopular one, guys. I don't think America's for Black people. I think really we need to find a place. I'm not in America and I don't have problems here. And I think we actually need to look as a people, where can we fit in a lifestyle that's equivalent in terms of Western society, where we can live and hopefully be productive citizens and feel safe at the same time. But I don't think America is that place anymore. Or we need to look at actual segregation, non-racist segregation, and bring that back into society again, because it's obvious this isn't working. So something needs to change, and it has to be dramatic or drastic, or we're going to increasingly see situations like this over the next years and decades until something actually does snap. So I don't know.
Need a Liberia 2.0.
No, Abu, you actually raised some of my curiosity. I was going to ask you this too, so I'm glad you said what you said. So because you grew up in America most of your life, right?
Actually, mostly in Germany.
Abu, share a bit of your story.
Oh, mostly in Germany. Yeah, I was going to ask you
and then around the world.
Okay. I was going to ask you what you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to ask you what you thought the difference was between being in America and being in Germany. If you had that contrast, I was curious about that.
Just the way that society operates here in general is completely different. To be honest, I'm kind of leery of Germans. I like them, but I'm very leery of them. If you look at German history and European history, all of the major acts of violence and war, Germany's right in the middle of it. These are some real, they're boring until they're psychotic. They're absolute deadpan people, and that's scary, actually.
Until they're not.
The waters run deep, look at German reunification wars, 51 million people killed. Nobody talks about that. They always talk about World War II, but World War II wasn't touching on what these people did to each other. And that was, so I'm always nervous around here. I have an exit strategy. I have a bug out plan for Germany. I do.
You're watching those art schools for any weirdos, right?
Indeed. Germany does have like a very strong, just like the United States, they have a constitutional law that like puts the rights of the individual over all else. And so what you find is like the police, they do deal with armed citizens and armed, like, robbers and whatnot here. But Germans will go for a leg shot over like shooting somebody in the head or the leg or the chest. I mean, these are the things the German policing does. And it rarely comes to that anyway. In general, the society doesn't, they like frown so strongly against chaos and discord that you find that there's more like societal checks amongst each other. And so police aren't really as strongly needed here as somewhere else. Now, this comes back to what we're going to have to talk about, what I was talking about with like segregation. This comes back to cohesion in terms of ethnic cohesion. We can't deny that this is something that's real. When you have people who are from the same ethnicity and culture, who have the same ideologies and beliefs, it becomes very easy to self-police one another. And so, this is why Germany's been having a lot of problems lately with the whole refugee thing, because we have like a whole bunch of people coming into Germany. I say we, like I'm a German or something, but they have a whole bunch of people coming in who come from entirely different cultures and standards and ethics, morals, virtues, and values that are very difficult to bring together with European ones, in specific German. And so I think this is where it comes to the idea is like, we need to maybe look at like, segregation again, and not a non-racist segregation where like, I can't use that water fountain or I can't shop in that store. No, but where communities are, you
mean more like a cultural segregation.
Yeah. But I mean, let's be honest, the culture and ethnicity tend to go close together.
They do. Yeah.
And, I mean, the reality is African Americans in general, we come from, I guess there has to be some sort of biology to it. When I look at it in general around the world, African, Black people are very boisterous, very energetic, very musical, very dancing and all this type of stuff. And you don't see this in Germany. I mean, you do, but you don't. It's different. Mm-hmm. And so there has to be some other way, to like make this this work. There's definitely differences there that are undeniable at this point. And
yeah,
I'm saying that as a Black man.
Yeah. And it's funny because I appreciate you calling yourself a Black man, because I've always had fun with the politically correct term African American, because I always ask people this, like, let's say that there's a European guy, kind of a colonial kind of guy. He grows up in Cape Town, Africa, right? He's got a dual citizenship. He's European. He's got a citizenship in Cape Town. I mean, technically, and then he moves to America, right? Technically, he would be an African American too.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, if you think about it, like I have friends that are Caribbean. I have friends that actually, I got some good friends from Florida that were from Trinidad and Tobago. They hate being called African American because they're neither African. They don't consider themselves African or American. There's West Indians, and I feel like that's So that's been kind of a politically correct term. I always tell people, you can call me a Black guy. I won't be offended. Like,
I've been to several African countries. I've been to 46 countries in my lifetime, and I can tell you that it's like, I'm definitely not African. I am Black, like Africans, but definitely from a culture. When I was hanging out there, I was like, yo, I'm not sure I can settle down here. Just not sure that this is going to work for me. So where's the African for me? You know what I mean? It's
exactly.
Nice. It was a great experience.
Absolutely.
Now, I know we wanted to touch on all of that real quick, but
that was a cool little 5-minute recap, right?
Yeah, half an hour. But no, Corey, you actually you had some. I know you wanted to kind of have Abu on to talk about family structures from a religious context.
Yeah,
and of course, how that ties into red pill and all that.
Yeah. So originally, how this topic came about is Abuamerican and I were originally going to do a one-on-one talk on my show, but that kept getting put off because of all my IRL projects. And so I just decided, now that we've started this podcast, if Abuamerican want to come on and do that talk here, you know what I mean, with the panel. And he said emphatically yes. I said emphatically yes. So we're all here, right? And so I guess to transition it, Abuamerican, you got multiple marriages and multiple kids, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. How would you feel about if your kids tell you they want to go to those protests?
Want to get close to the chin? Sure. I have 9 children, and 4 of them are technically adults. The one's coming up on 18; he'll be 18 soon. I have 2 sons, both are special forces soldiers. You know, one's a ranger, the other one's actually he's trying to go through SEAL school.
Oh wow.
You know, my daughter's going through university, and I got a son coming up. He's working on trying to be like an engineer. My children would never, for the life of them, think to go to such protests. It wouldn't even occur to them. It's not even conversations we have. What do you think? We don't even talk about this stuff because it's understood in my family that this is not something we're going to take part of. Life has enough challenges on its own, you know, and enough problems and obstacles that we don't need to go out looking for stuff. You know, I taught my children from an early age, death finds us all in the end. Don't go looking for them, you know? So it's an extrapolation of that ideology. You know, we're going to run into problems. We're going to run into trouble. Do you really need to go and create more for yourself? You know, and this goes back to what I think was Bobby. Was it Bobby saying? It's like this is masculine presence in the household. You know, you have to get guidance and structure because women, and again, we don't hate women. I have multiple women. I'm looking for more. But
good man.
Women, they deal with emotions, and I have a son. You know, he's half Indonesian, and he's very, very energetic. And when he's dealing with his sisters in the house, he's screaming and whatever else. And I got to come in. I'm like, hey, cut this out. That emotion, you're allowed to have it, but you have to clamp down and control that. Because if you let those emotions fly in society and in life, it's going to be chaos. And we see this in the African American community. A lot of Black males who didn't grow up with male structure in the household teach them how to control your internal anger. It's in my book. I call it the Mad Monkey. And that's what it is. It's that anger that all men have inside that allows you to like stab people 40 times when we see you like on TV and the news and flip out and go crazy. You don't learn to control that. That thing's gonna go crazy, and it's gonna wreck lives around you. It's gonna wreck your relationships with women that you have, with men that you have, your family. This stuff has to be taught. You can't chance this. It has to be taught by a man, and this goes for females also, not just the boys.
Very well said.
Yeah. So do you think you touched on it a bit? So do you think your kids would not participate just because they're afraid of what dad would say, or is it because you've guided them through this time and now they realize, you know, what is valuable and what is good guidance?
Some of both. They have my ethics, virtues, values, morals. They have those. So already in their mind, it's something that I've embedded into their mind that these are just not things unless we just don't take part in this stuff. You know, this is not something that interests us from our ethics, from our values. It's not the way we behave. We don't go out and trash streets or whatever else. I don't even see the efficacy anywhere of protests, except in very extreme cases where, like we saw, what nation is toppled because of protests. We just don't hold that it works. Then to top it off, this goes back to what I was talking about with German culture. We have a family culture where there's a shame-based culture within our family that, like, you know what, we would be disappointed with a family member who took part of something like that, and nobody wants to face that. You know, nobody wants to face family disappointment. You know, from me, from their mother, from their brothers and sisters, that you would go and take part in something that we as a people, as a family, don't take part of in the first place, and then you get in trouble or you're out there causing trouble. You know, so it's a multi-level type of, you know, ideas that keeps them out of that type of situations.
Would you say, Abu, that, you know, coming from your history, you were raised in a two-parent household? Could you give us a little bit of kind of where all of this came from? Is this generational or what?
I would say it's generational. Yeah, two-parent household. My mother's from Trinidad and Tobago. She's Indian. Desi Indian. my father's actually from the ghetto. My dad's from the hood, but he actually grew up in a two-parent household, two-parent house, and he was the only one who got out. And I have to probably credit my dad the most because my dad, he has all his brothers, all of them went to jail. They were all criminals, bank robbers, you know, murderers, whatever else. I have a cousin who was shot in the back of the head by a crackhead. You know, he tried to rob a crack house, not a crackhead, a crack dealer, actually. He tried to rob a crack house. So my dad, it was very important for him to get away from that. And the only way to get out of the hood for him was to join the military. So when he joined the military, it was like a perfect storm of what he wanted: structure and order, and escape from like the ghetto. And so what did we learn? You know, how to stay out of that. You know, if anything, he took us like to the ghetto twice to visit my grandmother because she was getting old and he wanted us to meet her before she died. But we never went there. You know, like we went in, met grandma, got out. He was like, this is not a place to hang out. This is not a place to be. I don't want you guys around and stuff. So I have to credit my father for that.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, Abu, because I grew up in Brightmoor, and Brightmoor is like the worst part of Detroit. Like they call it the hood within the hood, and it's
Okay.
crazy because I live there. Oh, if you just Google Brightmoor, Detroit, it'll look like war-torn Germany. Like after we were done with it, like abandoned houses, like it's crazy. And the crazy thing is, even though I grew up in the hood for half my life, like I'll be 40 later this year, it's a perishable skill growing up in the hood. Like, because
Right.
I've been in the suburb for so long because I got out as soon as I made enough money to that when I go back to the hood, I'm almost like somebody who's kind of never lived there before. Like, it's not that I don't have street smarts, but I still
Right.
have that. Like, you gotta be cautious, man. So
We can call you
it's
Bobby.
exactly. So it's funny you say that, how your dad was right on by not wanting to take you guys to the hood too much, man. Because the thing about it is, and this isn't a judgment on people that live in the hood. I mean, I still have good friends that live in Detroit. It's a depressing place, man. It's not healthy. It's a toxic environment. There's weeds growing through the concrete everywhere. There's busted glass everywhere. In Detroit, there's burned out. You can go to Detroit right now, and there are still buildings that are burned down from the 1967 race riots that haven't even been knocked down yet. We're going on 50 years. Those things are still up, in their last condition. And so, yeah, man, and again, to me, it all goes back to that fatherlessness, because prior to the Great Society, prior to Lyndon Johnson instituting that, the black family was very strong in America. It was very strong. And that's how we survived a lot of the Jim Crow stuff. That's how ultimately blacks weren't broken by that old Southern racism, because we still had each other as the family unit. But once Jim Crow was defeated and once all these welfare programs started taking place, it's almost like it's a new slavery. And I find it interesting that the Great Society that destroyed the black family, that destroyed that structure, and I would even argue that it's kind of destroyed the American church too, in a way, because once the family breaks up, it's only a matter of time before the church breaks up. Because as Catholics, we believe that the family is the domestic church and the father is the priest of the home. So if there's no father in the home, how can you have a domestic church? Especially if you're Catholic, because women can't be ordained. But the thing is, I find it funny that the Great Society passed in 1965, which is 100 years almost to the day of the Emancipation Proclamation, when Lincoln freed the slaves. So it's almost like, okay, we freed you from the political slavery, but 100 years later, we've got this economic slavery that I would argue has been a lot more destructive than the institutional slavery, because the institutional slavery our families were still together, but this one broke us up, and we're picking up the pieces 50 years later.
Yeah, I know that's something. I don't know if you guys have seen around, but Killer Mike, the rapper and activist from Atlanta, one of his big phrases right now is like, "We're all still under the same masters and kill your masters," kind of thing. But now it's more an economic, systemic issue, right? Instead of somebody literally forcing you to work a field, right?
Yeah.
And, yeah, I think that resonates a lot. Abuamerican, this is a little bit of a topic change, but Bobby reminded me of this when he was talking about male priests. But how do you see, like, in the Islamic culture and Muslim families, have they been being? Is there any kind of attacks on like the traditional way to do it, like from feminists or other political things, and they're trying to change your guys' family structure?
They're trying, but it's not working.
Yeah.
That's the beauty that I'm gonna have to say. Excuse me. It's the beauty of Islam. They're trying, and they're facing significant resistance, pushback. We were just joking about this on Twitter about maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, about like the beginning of Ramadan, which was about a month ago. That we have all these mosques and masjids opening up that are like female run, where you got female imams leading men in prayer, and there's no precedence for this Islamically anywhere in the text. Anywhere you can't find it. This is something that's acceptable. And they're always financed by like some big government organization or some like, big private organization. And they always fail. Despite having all of this money and all this backing and financing, these masjids that are run by women, female imams, which don't exist, they keep collapsing because it's just not, they don't understand how the Islamic community works. And that just comes from, and I'm gonna go off on a quick tangent here on why this doesn't work. And in Islam, we have it's called the chain of narrators. There's an Arabic word. It's an actual science that you can study, and it's called isnad. The science of isnad, the science of changing narrators. And what it is like Allah said to Jibril, Jibril said to Muhammad, Muhammad said to his companions, then his companion said to so-and-so who documented it, you know? And so there's this chain of narrators that you can find all the way up to this day, statements from the Quran and the Sunnah and from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And so it's very, very difficult to distort Islam because it's like, okay, where's your proof? And then they bring a chain of narrators. That's fabricated. This is fake. This is a lie. This is this. This is this. And so when they try and change the religion, it's like you have to bring proof from the chains of narrators. It's really impossible. It's nearly impossible to like try and alter the religion unless you make something up. And if you make it up, we find out. And so you find significant resistance against pushes to change Islam from both males and females because it's just literal heresy, you know. And you're not going to find many Muslims that support it. And those that do, you can find that from an Islamic creed, an Islamic belief stance, that these people, they're teetering like on the edge of not being Muslim. And I think everybody knows that Muslims get pretty extreme when it comes down to like, oh, you left Islam, huh? And then all of a sudden knives come out and video cameras come out, and you know, so those are the extreme guys. You know, this is not common behavior that's supposed to be accepted. But if you get out there and you put yourself publicly, you make yourself public to those extreme guys too. So people are real careful about, you know, messing around with Islam because, you know, you make yourself public and known, and then everybody knows, and then the jackals and the hyenas from amongst the Muslims come out, and then the regular person comes out for you, and it's a hot mess for anybody who does it.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting too, because I think a lot of that comes from like who are your authority figures, right? So if the government and all these people are trying to enforce rules or enforce change on what's going on, but you're not bending to it because you don't see those as your authority figures, right? You see your community as a higher role than the government or any other powers and policies in place, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, like I said, we have Islamic scholarship for the sciences of Islam, and they can be broken down into the science of hadith, which are the prophetic statements. You have the science of the Quran, understanding, revelation of the Quran. Like when people say, I read the Quran, and then it's like, you find that Muslims laugh at them because it's like, it doesn't fit any of the sciences of interpreting the verses of the Quran. And then you have the science of the chain of narrators, and it goes on and on and on. So since we have like a strong culture of Islamic scholarship, those generally the scholars are the people we follow, you know. And so, you know, people can say whatever they want, but then it's like, you know, okay, you can actually to this day go to a scholar and say, Sheikh, so and so said this, what do you think? And then he can say, Allah and his messenger said this, such and such scholar from the past said this, the companion said this person, he's misguided, he's an idiot, you know, don't listen to him. And so it's very difficult, you know, to for anybody to take a leadership role except for those people who have studied the sciences of Islam.
So I had a question for you, Abu, and this might shift us in a new direction, which I would like to hear your take on. Has there been much of an attempt for feminism to try to infiltrate and chip away at the family structure within Islam? Have you guys, because, you know, in the Catholic Church, we've been invaded by feminism. We have what I call these hippie leftover nuns from the 60s that try to get, you know, men's to be priests and things like that. Have you guys had similar invasions of feminism like that, or at least attempts in Islam?
It's been more passive as opposed to active. And when I say passive, I guess this is what the West went through also. You find a lot of Muslim women are like, oh, we're oppressed, you know, and this, that, the other. But generally, the position from Islamic texts of women is so high in the family that you don't find a lot of popular support for it. But you find some crazy speech here and there. Oh, I'm oppressed. You know, just goofy stuff that they say, you know, and this comes from this mentality of like Western feminism. You do find this, but like direct attacks, like I said, they tend to be like pushback. When it gets too direct, you find even Muslim women who will say, I'm oppressed in the family, even though there's no support for what they're saying Islamically. They'll push back against direct feminist attacks, like, oh no, we can't have a part of that because this, that, the other. But then at the same time, that Muslim sister will say stuff that like kind of supports feminism. You're like, you crazy bag of contradictions. What are you talking about? You know, but that's women in general. So, you know, you can't, that's why they need, you know, male structure and leadership because they're goofy, you know, and that's universal, Muslim or not Muslim.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what happened to your guys' road safety situation once Saudi Arabia allowed women to drive?
I haven't been keeping up. I have a homie that lives there. I should ask him. But
yeah, so yeah, because I know you mentioned kind of like Germany with the whole refugee situation, and Minnesota has a similar situation. And I used to work a job where I was doing. I was basically a bus driver, and so you got to be very much aware of everything that's going on around you, anyone that's driving, and you try to keep an open mind and try to just be careful of everybody. But then there was one specific group of people that always almost hit me in so many situations, and it was always a Muslim woman, and I just thought, I'm like, you don't want to start making judgments, but you see that, and I'm like, all right, this is what's happening.
My wife's from Indonesia, and I let her drive one time. She's only driven a few times here in Germany. It's I had to go pick up a car, and she was driving behind me. And this woman got so close to smacking other cars. I was looking in the rearview mirror, almost crashing. What the hell is she doing back there? I mean, I was freaking out. I just think it's women, dude. I don't know. They're kind of wild. I don't like sitting in the passenger seat. If I do, I just look at my phone. I'm like, do not look at the road. Do not look at the road. I don't care where she's from.
That's fantastic.
I want to see my dad coming.
I wanted to maybe touch a little bit about your wives.
Yeah.
When did you first get married, and was there a way that you knew that this was the woman for you?
Which time I got married? I've been married quite a few times.
Your first time. Started your first wife. I would say that.
Oh, well, my very first wife that was a long time ago. I was with this German lady for 24 years. I had 6 kids with her. But let's go more modern. I've been married to my current wife roughly for 4 years, and then I've been married to my second wife about a year now. In between that, I've been married a whole bunch of times, and I came to find that after my 24-year marriage ended, I was trying to find another Muslim wife, and it was hit and miss. I don't get a lot of community support, in terms of finding women, because that's something you can do also when you have an Islamic community. You can actually find women to marry through the community. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have this. I'm living in the bush in Germany, so I had to look online, and it was a nightmare. I was getting married, divorced. So I came up with a system of vetting. I'm actually, working on that, putting it down on paper. Good. And through this vetting system, I found ways of basically eliminating women early on by testing for bad characteristics. Because really, a lot of women aren't really original. They tend to repeat the same behaviors over and over amongst different ethnicities. And I think the first time I came across this was in Qatar. I had 3 wives. I had a German, a Somali, and a Kenyan. And at one point, it clicked to me. It's these 3 women are acting the same way and saying the same things, but they don't really communicate with each other. They grew up culturally different, with different languages and different religions. It's how are they saying the same thing? So this has to be biological. And when I started looking at women in that way, it became easy to start spotting patterns of corruption and problems also. So, am I ranting or am I staying on topic?
No,
here?
Yeah,
you're good.
You're doing great.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. So, when looking for my wives, I started using a system of vetting for the negative attributes, and then doing the same thing that women do, which is look for disqualifiers. Men tend to look for qualifiers in women, which is a mistake. Women look for disqualifiers in men. They look for a reason why do I not want to be around this guy? Guys are I'm sure we all got that one friend. It's oh, she's so great. She's awesome. And she's intelligent. And when you actually meet her, she's yeah, it's just really average. He's creating qualifiers for this woman. And it's a mistake because it makes you overlook, the negative aspects of a woman because horny. And so I eliminated the horny, and I was what am I looking at here when I look at this behavior and that behavior and that behavior? And when I started doing that, I actually started finding good women. And I actually have 2 good women. They don't like each other, but I do have 2 good women, that have positive attributes. And yeah, I think that's what most guys need to do. I kind of went on such a rant there, I lost myself.
Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, what you're doing is definitely, I think all of us would agree here, definitely the more mature, realistic way to do it. But I would ask, how, to use more internet lingo, how many simp Muslims have you met, that have that one-itis and that, desperation to get a girl, any girl, right?
Good
Simp
God,
Muslims,
man.
wow.
It's a freaking nightmare out there with the Muslims. Twitter really brought it to light, and it really shocked me. We got a ton of simps and white knights, dude. It's a real mess. And I'm working on changing it. I got a community of guys, we are like-minded. We're trying to spread this, return back to masculinity, because that is 100% Islamic supported, absolute masculinity. But you just find these guys, man, they're so they're so horny, I guess. I don't know how else to call it, man. They're willing to just eliminate any benefits to themselves as a man to make a woman happy. And I'm like, dude, that's not going to work for you. You know,
Yeah.
it's bad right now. It really is.
I don't know why, but I had such a politically incorrect joke just pass through my mind right now. Does it make you want to sick the white Knights Templar on these simp Muslims?
You should let them fight it out, you know. Just let them eliminate each other, you know.
Yeah. That's crazy.
The world would be better for it.
Yeah, like how does? Because I know you said you've been married multiple times, but you've also had divorces, right?
Yes,
I don't think you said you're married to your original. How does like marriage and divorce law work within Islam? Like, can you just kind of marry and divorce as you choose, or is there like a big process and it's frowned upon, or how does that work?
It's actually quite simple. Islamically, you can marry with 3 people. The woman has what's called a guardian, a wakil, and then you need an imam, I guess a preacher for lack of a better term, and 2 witnesses. And that's all you need to get Islamically married. To get divorced, you should have some witnesses, but you can divorce your wife just per speech. She cannot initiate a divorce. Only a man can initiate a divorce. Mm-hmm. She can request what's an annulment, which is called a khula, but really she can't initiate a divorce. She's also not incentivized to divorce because there is no divorce rate in Islam. You don't get like a whole bunch of, alimony and child support, whatever. Okay, you do have to support the child, but Islamically, once the child reaches maturity, they have the right to decide where they want to be, with their mother or with their father. So there's no real incentive for a woman to like get divorced from a man, other than like, he's a really bad dude. She's not economically incentivized to do it. So it's a very simple process, getting married and getting divorced in Islam. It's not complicated at all.
Now, would your marriages be considered like private marriages? Because obviously most countries enforce their monogamy laws and things like that. So how do you,
religious, religious marriages? I don't support brothers getting legally married. When I talk to Muslim men, I'm like, get married, don't do it legally. You find a lot of sisters are pushing for legal marriages, and really from an Islamic standpoint, there's no benefit. It's like, it doesn't make the marriage more halal, more permissible Islamically. It doesn't even make it Islamically permissible. If you get legally married, you still can't screw the woman as a Muslim because you have to be Islamically married, and you can't have sex before marriage. So what's a legal marriage going to do for you as a Muslim? You can't have sex with him. He can't have sex with you. A legal marriage doesn't bring you any benefit. You still have to go and do the Islamic one. And if you get Islamically divorced and you're legally married, you still can't screw the girl because you're not married anymore. So there's no benefit legally to getting married as a Muslim man and woman. So I don't support it.
So it's really just... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask a quick follow-up question to that. So is there kind of like a spiritual tribunal that's set up within Islam that kind of regulates the marriage within the religious community, since there's no legal force behind it? Like, let's say a woman wants to get that annulment, or a woman has a grievance with her husband, or a husband wants a bill of divorce from his wife. Where would they go to get that?
She goes to her guardian, the guy who gives her away in marriage. So basically, there's always a chain in Islam. I think it's the same in any religion, really, but in Islam, the chain is like, the person follows the commands of Allah and His Messenger, and then comes the husband or the father, and then comes everybody else underneath him. So me, I have a 20-year-old daughter, and I'm trying to get her married. So right now, I have what's called guardianship over her. I'm her wakil. I have guardianship over her, and I'm responsible for her. Now, when she gets married, I hand over the guardianship to her husband. That means my authority has lessened over her. She now has to obey her husband more so than her father. I mean, I can still give her commands and orders, but not to the degree of her husband. Mm-hmm. Now, when that's handed over to her husband, of course, he takes control and, he's in charge. So there's never like a woman free on her own, just running around making crazy decisions on her own. There shouldn't be. Let's put it like that.
Sure. Do you still have any semblance of rights? Like, for example, like you give over authority to her husband. God forbid, like, let's say he mistreated her, or where would your rights as a father come in on that?
Yeah, sorry. That's I actually missed that part of the question. Yeah, sorry. I apologize. So basically, if she's having problems in the marriage, I'm her arbiter. So now she returns back to me as her guardian, because I'm still her guardian in the sense, if she gets divorced or her husband dies, she doesn't just go out and get her own apartment and start living on her own. No, she comes back to my house. I mean, we find Muslim women doing this now, but my daughter's going to come back to my house, and I'm like, you're not going out there living on your own, and doing whatever you want to do. So if she has problems with her husband, I go and I speak to him and say, hey, look, man, we're having problems. It's that you're having problems, and I'm here to, arbitrate and find out what's going on. And if my daughter's wrong, then I sit her down and say, look, girl, you're being goofy, you're being emotional, you need to chill out. If he's wrong, I'm like, look, you're being wrong, you're being goofy, you need to straighten up. And if you don't, well, then the hammer gets dropped. And, and either I take her from you, and if you don't want to give her back to me, then we gonna fight this out. I'm gonna go get my sons, the special forces guys, and we gonna come back. So
Wow.
Yeah.
You
rescue operation.
really answered my question. Like,
So arbitration is handled by her wakil. Now, what you have now in the current environment is you have a lot of non-Muslim women becoming Muslim, and then they don't have guardians, and so they go to masjids, and the imam will act as a guardian. And unfortunately, you find a lot of these guys don't take the role seriously, or they're just playing out. They're overwhelmed because they have like 50 sisters that they're supposed to be looking over, and then so it's very difficult for them to actually handle that position very well. Or you find that we have this where like a lot of attractive women will become Muslim, and then he is in a conflict because he's attracted to the woman, and so a new set of problems have cropped up in the recent times. Yeah.
So do you guys have some sort of like a marriage certificate of sorts then
You can get one. That's why there's witnesses. Part of Islamic rulings is, or what do they call it, rules, tradition and culture is that you have a party, so that the community knows that this woman is married. Because generally we don't wear red rings or anything like this. This is why you have witnesses. So generally there's a party held, a marriage, ceremony, an actual wedding party, and the community knows that this woman is now attached to this man, and so. Generally, no, we don't have certificates. They do issue them now, but it's something new that we do.
No wedding, so there's no real mark of marriage in terms of like you said, no wedding rings. Is there anything similar to that? Kind of like how in among Hindus they'll have the marking on their head.
The bindi. Some men used to grow their beards. I don't know if that's still honored in Islam.
The what?
So some of the men used to grow the beard. That was like a symbol of their marriage.
Yeah, growing the beard is mandatory for men in Islam, period. If you find a guy who's shaving, he's actually breaking an Islamic rule. The man is supposed to grow his beard. He's not supposed to touch it. You trim the mustache, grow the beard. No, there's not really anything to symbolize it. I mean, in some cultures, you find that the woman will wear a certain type of hijab, a head cover, and it won't be complete. And then when she's married, she'll cover properly and completely, basically signifying that I'm off the market. That's not really Islamically correct, but no, there's not really any real symbol or emblem or some sort of marking to show that she's married as opposed to not. If a man is interested in a woman and he wants to find out she's married, he can approach her, her wakil or her guardian and say, hey, I'm interested in marriage. He'd say, sorry, dude, she's already taken. But generally that's how you find out. Or if you're not from that community, you can.
I like that term, Islamically correct.
So Abu, just like in the practical sense now. So you are married. You said to three women right now.
Two working on three.
Working on the third. Good man. So how does that dynamic work then in the home? As you said already, they didn't quite like each other. Kind of walk us through a little bit of day-to-day life of living with two women.
Well, I mean, these two women I'll never get under one roof. I'm used to living with my women under one roof. This isn't going to work for these two. They're just too much at each other's throat. But prior to this, I had a girl I used to lovingly call her Becky. She was a Polish revert, and we would be under the one roof, and that was actually quite well. I actually put this in a video series that I put out of how you live under one roof and what the rules are, and you have to be absolutely strict with these rules, because if you don't, women are they're sort of like children, and if you don't set boundaries, they're going to just keep pushing until there's nothing left. Yeah. So living under one roof with multiple women is they need space. I mean, that's just the reality. You need to have space for these women. They need to have their own space because they're emotional creatures. They're going to freak out one day where everything is normal, and then she's going to see you come by and slap the other one on the butt or something. She's going to lose it. And you've been doing that for 6 months, and then all of a sudden she's I'm having my period. Why did you smack her on the butt when I'm having my period? What are you talking about? Come here, I'll smack you too. So, it's really difficult, at times. But if you have a very good relationship and a very solid frame with women, it's highly workable. And believe it or not, they're actually, it would appear from my observation, they're in a more natural environment with their co-wives than as opposed to if you have them in multiple houses. Because when you have them in multiple houses, there's no sense of family and unity, and we're together. And so you get an adversarial type of environment between the two. Oh, you're 5 minutes late. Oh, why? Was she keeping you again? Yada, yada, yada. Because when you're traveling between houses, you might hit traffic. And she's got to automatically blame the other woman. She's not going to logically think that maybe, traffic was bad or, you stopped at the store to grab something. No, she's going to automatically think it was the other woman. Then she's going to start messaging you. This is something that's a big deal. They'll start cross-messaging you when you're with the other one. But when you're in the same house, this type of stuff doesn't happen. There's more mutual respect for each other's time. Because when you're with one woman, you're with her, and that's her time. And so there's more respect mutually amongst themselves when you live under one roof as opposed to separate houses.
And what about kids then? If there's obviously kids from two different women, how would that fit into the equation?
Kids from two different women, they're brothers and sisters, they're siblings, and that's my rule in my house. Like, who's that kid's dad? I am. Who's that kid's dad? I am. That makes them brothers and sisters. If that's a boy and that's a girl, they can't get no nookie going on. They're brothers and sisters. So to me, you better leave whatever emotions you have out as a woman. Leave it alone from these kids. They're going to grow up to be brothers and sisters. And when you're dead and gone, or when we're dead and gone, that bond of family is going to maintain and it's going to be there. So just freaking whatever you're dealing with, woman, deal with it, but leave the kids out of it. They get a universal pass.
What kind of a this is more of a practical question. What kind of an upfront contract or an upfront disclosure do you give to a woman about what she's to expect in a polygamous household? How does that conversation go?
It just depends on how much I like her.
Just throw her in.
You got to be as fair as possible. With each woman. I mean, there are rules in Islam that are very strict about how women and how wives are treated. Especially a man with multiple wives. It's to the point that there's a prophetic tradition, a hadith, where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, like, the man on the day of resurrection who has multiple wives and was unjust between them, he'll be raised up as contorted and twisted. And then he'll ask his Lord, he's like, why am I raised up contorted and twisted? He's like, because you had multiple wives, you were unjust between them. So that's the way you were between your wives, and that's the way you're raised up on this day. So, going into like the rules and regulations of Islam and how you deal with the wives equally, that is quite, it can be quite extensive, but in basic, what you spend and your time has to be equal.
Mm-hmm.
And some people like to say that emotionally you have to be equal, but a lot of the scholars disagree with this. And that you're naturally going to love one woman more than the other, depending on how she treats you, and whatnot. Because Aisha was his favorite wife, and nobody disputes this. So,
Is there a numerical limit to how many wives you can have?
4.
Islam 4. Okay.
4 is
Well, prior to Islam, the pre-Islamic Arabs had 25, 26 wives, sort of like the Mormons. And then when the revelation came, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, divorce all your wives except for 4. You can keep 4. That's it. And so
now that's 4 living wives. So God forbid if one of them passed away, could you replace that one to get it back to 4? Or okay.
Yeah. If you have 4 and you divorce one, you can remarry again. If one dies, you can remarry again. That's why my saying online is, if it ain't 4, there's room for more.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I had a question maybe on the opposite side of the spectrum. Is there any like doctrine or anything like that about celibacy? Like, do your imams or priests have to be celibate at all, or are they also encouraged to marry?
As far as I know, from the narrations that I've read, it's completely impermissible. It is not allowed. Celibacy is not allowed. There was a narration where the Prophet, peace be upon him, 3 men were talking, and one of them said, I'm going to pray and never stop praying. One said, I'm going to fast and I'm never going to stop fasting. And another one said, I'm never going to marry. And they were all berated because these are all praiseworthy things. And he says, and he said, the messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, said, I pray and then I break my, and then I don't, and I go and I do my things. He says, and then I fast and some days I don't. And he says, from amongst the women, I marry them. And he's like, and said, anybody who, there was some sort of like a negative connotation attached to it. The narration I haven't heard in a long time, but he said something like, if, these behaviors are not from the people who are not from amongst us. So celibacy is frowned upon, is not something that I know is permissible. Actually, if you have the capability and capacity to marry, you should.
Awesome. Yeah. And then how many wives are, like we said, the maximum is 4, but are there a lot of guys in the community that are just happy with monogamy, or is everybody kind of looking to, max out, so to speak?
I was just going to ask that.
Yeah, I don't. There's guys that say they're happy with monogamy, but I don't believe You know, I'll give you an example. I was working in Qatar. I was working for the Ministry of Defense, and we had a bunch of guys, Westerners, British guys, American guys, whatever else, and we were all talking about polygyny. And they were like, "No, I'm happy, this, that, the other," and it turned into a huge argument in the office to the point where we were like, we can't talk about this. And then, like, over the next month or so, all these guys that were pro-monogamy came to me, "Hey, so-and-so knows my wife. If I had, like, defended that position of polygyny, his wife, he'd tell his wife, and his wife would come to my wife, and I'd catch hell." I was like, "You little limp, sacked, testicular, fortitude challenge mofo. What?" And then they were actually asking me to help them find wives that live in other countries, and I'll go visit her and I'll keep her secret. I'm like, "Man, come on, secret. Why? This ain't even allowed in Islam." So after that, I decided, like, anybody who says they're happy with monogamy is just a straight liar.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, because it's such a polar opposite of the state of the U.S. Right? The state of the U.S. is a lot of not just monogamy, but also that polygyny. The multiple men into one woman is becoming more and more popular, right?
Yeah.
Is polygyny is it required or optional?
No, it's optional. Yeah, you don't have to do it. A lot of guys don't go into it just because of danger. They'd like to, but there's a danger of being unjust between wives, and the danger that the narrations on being unjust between wives is so hard that a lot of guys are actually afraid to go into it. So they're like, I'm not going to mess around in front of the law with this, and I'm going to stay away from it. I can respect that. I'm a risk taker.
Here's kind of a complicated follow-up question to that. So the Nation of Islam, like the Farrakhan, Elijah Muhammad Islam, how do they view polygyny as opposed to traditional Middle Eastern, the more Arabic-driven Islam?
To be honest, I don't know. We don't consider them to be Muslims. We don't consider.
Okay.
They're not considered to be within the fold of Islam. There's actually a very adversarial type of stance between Nation of Islam and actual Muslims. So I don't really know much about them, unfortunately.
Okay. No, I appreciate your transparency, man, because I've now that I know that you've said, I've always kind of seen them as not the real thing either for different reasons. But I was curious where they fell on that.
Yeah, they're pro-black from a nationalist standpoint. It's actually it opposes Islam. There's also a lot of narrations that oppose racism, and they have a very pro-black type of mentality. So it doesn't really fit in with Islam.
Yep. Yeah.
So Abu, when it comes to your pilgrims, obviously you've made trips out to Mecca and a couple of the other places.
I live there.
You have perfect, yeah. And you have to travel with your wives. And I mean, on trips like that, how would that dynamic work? Where do you have to get 2 rooms, or would you keep it all together in one location?
My best example is with Becky. Is I used to travel with Becky and my current wife that I have. I call them by ethnic names, Becky and Ling Ling. I'm politically correct. So I travel with
clearly.
I got an Airbnb, and I got a quite spacious one, so I would separate it just basically like I would my house. I mean, traveling, because the thing is, if I travel with one solo, then I have to travel with the other one solo. So for me, it's easier if I just take them all at once, and I don't have to deal with the stress of was I equal? What did I do on this trip? How long was I on this trip? We're all together.
2 flights.
Yeah, exactly. If we're staying more than multiple nights, then one night I stay with her, then the next night I stay with her, and everything is said and done and justice. It has been achieved. Yeah, so that's how I personally handle it. Or I travel alone. If it turns into such a drama that I'm like, oh, why? I just want to be alone with you. You know what? Okay, how about you just stay alone at the house while I go on my own? And so they're incentivized to behave because they'd rather be with me with her than be at home alone with her.
Right.
So how do your wives treat the other woman's children? If that makes sense. Do they consider them like their second mom, or how does that whole dynamic work?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is it still one big family, or is it like mini tribes within the house?
In other words, all the children have you in common, but they don't have the mothers in common. So how does that play out?
I mean, they cook for them. They clean up after them. It's not really a problem. I mean, my big kids come up here. I mean, and it's just handled. My wife cooks for my son. When he comes up, we eat steaks together. He's 18, whatnot. So it's not really my daughter, she babysits. You know, she comes up, she babysits. You know, this, that, the other. It's not. To be honest, call me sexist. I don't know. I don't leave this stuff in the hands of the women. I'm like, this is the rules. This is what you're gonna do. Follow it. You don't have an option in this. I don't know how you're gonna deal with it emotionally, but deal with it. You're gonna deal with the kids in a good way. If you got to go in the bathroom or outside and cry for a half hour, you do it. But these kids, they're siblings, and at the end of the day, if I die, you know, and your son here, my son, I got a little boy. That 18-year-old downstairs, he's tasked with looking after him like I would. I was like, so you don't give that young man down there a hard time, because when it comes down to defense of the family, whatever else, he's the one that's got to come up here and save your ass getting raped or killed or him kidnapped. I was like, so do you want him to do that? Yes, then treat him well.
Now, did any of you guys bring up, and I just don't want to repeat another question we did, but did you guys ask on, like, I was curious, what is the relationship between your wives then? Like, because I know you were saying, like when you go on trips, you spend one night with one night with another.
Yeah.
And it's just being transparent. Are you allowed to spend with both of them at the same time?
There is an allowance to sleep with both women in one bed, but you're not allowed to have any hanky-panky. You know, threesomes aren't allowed. It's just not.
Really?
Yeah, it's not permissible. It's not permissible because there's a thing that's called aura. Aura means private areas, and so it's permissible for a husband to see his wife's private areas and her to see his. But it's not permissible for me to actually see another man's private areas. That's why I don't take showers in public gyms, because dudes walk around, you know, like there's a woman in here with his winky all out. I'm like, yo, what you gonna do with this dude? Yeah,
Do it in the helicopter.
Put that thing away. You know, and so the same stands between women. Women are not allowed to see each other's private parts. And so there's not really a way you're going to, like, you know, get a threesome without them seeing each other's private parts.
I was going to say you could just, like, blindfold both of them.
Great advice there, Amos.
Yeah.
Go to a pitch black cave. You know,
we're really bad at loopholes in Islam. You know, it's calling like, no.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I always wondered that myself, because I've known Mormons. There was this one guy that lived in Utah, and he was hardcore into polygyny. And actually, a good friend of mine had a friend. He was kind of my friend who kind of lost his marriage over pursuing polygyny. And the first thought that came to mind when this guy came from kind of like a Protestant, you know, Pentecostal kind of a background, then all of a sudden Jesus became Yeshiach, and if you didn't call him Yeshiach, you're not a real Christian. He just kind of started. Yeah, it was weird. And the first thought that came to mind is, man, you're just trying to get legal menages going, like, because, you know. And so I you know, I'm glad you cleared that up, because I always wondered how that was with the different, like with the Mormons, with the Muslims, with the the Mennonites, I think, too. But yeah,
the blindfolds are actually a half decent idea, but the scholars have ruled that even the sound of sex, you know, becomes impermissible if you can hear it from the other room. So you gotta, like, you know, you gotta put it in a way so nobody else hears you. So
get some proper soundproofing.
Right? Yeah.
All right, we I know you guys were talking in the chat, our little chat here. Do you guys want to bring in some Q&A?
Yeah,
yes,
we throw the StreamYard link into the chat. I got one more quick question for you. I had it; it's in my head somewhere. I just got to dig it out. So when you were looking for additional wives, so in the Old Testament, I want to say Exodus, but don't fish with me. It said the requirement for multiple wives for at least the Old Testament Christian side was you got to make sure you can be able to afford all of them, right?
Yeah.
And so that was the requirement for the men's side, that you had to be able to, if you're getting an additional wife, you can't reduce any amount of the original resources and expenses from the older wives, right? Does Islam have similar, like, requirements for men before they look for more marriages?
You know, I have to admit, I'm not really sure about this one. I mean, a woman can forego whatever she wants. I mean, she can agree to anything, but I'm not really sure if there's a rule on it. It is customary. The scholars I know do say that you should treat a woman what's customary to her. So if she comes from a big mansion, you know, and you bring her down into a 2-bedroom shack, you know, it's going to be a problem. You know, it's permissible for her. It's a valid reason for her to reject, you know, your marriage proposal. Now, if she accepts that, that's a different story. You know, but you know, so a woman can forego whatever she wants, but generally it is customary to give her the lifestyle that she's known, that she's grown up with. As to whether or not like that is an absolute where it's like haram, halal, permissible or impermissible type of thing, I can't really say. I'm not sure, unfortunately.
Are there cases where, and I'm just asking because we don't have anyone joining the questions you said, but are there cases where men have basically married more women than they can handle?
Regularly. My first multiple marriage was that way. I married 3 women and I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, hey, let's just do this. And I just shot from the hip. And dude, good God, that blew up in my face. You know? But
what
I
happens
learned
in that case? Is there like an intervention from their fathers to kind of like take them away from you?
No, in this case, I just fired everybody. I just fired the whole squad. But basically, one of them, the worst of them was, I mean, she was also the prettiest. It was a Somali girl, and her family was happy to get rid of her. She was absolute trouble, and I didn't know it. And so when I got a hold of her, actually, I didn't do too bad of a job, but I did it not too bad of a job from a more like purple/blue pill type perspective. But I still had like these really like strong attributes and traits that weren't blue and purple pill. And so I was barely keeping it together. And then when it came apart, good God, it came apart. So her family didn't really want anything to do with it. It's like, good luck, buddy. Here you go. Sort of like a refugee in the Mediterranean. Well, good luck, homie. You know, no life jacket. Tell us how it works out, you know. And so they were happy to be rid of her because, in the sense, remember what I was saying about handing over the guardianship. They're like, "Ooh, someone took her. Yes, we got rid of her."
So how did that work then? When everything fell out, did you have to like give her back, like bring her back to her family?
Her family didn't want her back. Actually, she went and lived with friends, some Egyptian girls.
Wow.
She went and lived with Egyptian girls. The family was like, "Hey, you messed this up. We done." You know, and so she ended up going to live with some Egyptian girls because she was a mess and a bigger mess than I would. As beautiful as she was, this girl could be like, I'm not even just talking model. I mean supermodel level. As beautiful as she was, you know, she was just, oh, good God, this is a mess, and nobody wanted anything to do with her. The family was like done with her.
You know, the Jews had. They were very, you know, like if you look in Leviticus and, you know, certain parts of the Old Testament, they were very big on ceremonial cleanliness. Like they had ceremonial laws that were really big that you wouldn't be considered morally impure. Like, for example, you know, if a woman had a child, like I've even heard anti-Catholics try to make this argument against the Blessed Mother, against the Virgin Mary. They say in Luke chapter 2, you know, that she was impure because she gave birth. Which kind of proves too much. It's like, well, you do realize she gave birth to like the Son of God, right? So that doesn't make her like morally impure, but according to Mosaic law, it made her ceremonially impure. Just like if a woman was menstruating, she'd be considered ceremonially impure.
Yeah, this exists. I don't know.
I was going to ask you. Okay, because I was going to ask you because I know there's lots of parallels between Judaism and Islam when it comes like to the dietary code and things like that. So when it comes to sex, we're all men here. Like, if you have multiple wives, do you have to compartmentalize that? Like, are you not allowed to have sex with both wives on the same day, or does a certain amount of time have to pass in between sexual acts with each woman? Like, how does that work?
Okay, well, there's a narration of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that when he would travel or before he'd go on a battle, he would have sex with his wives on the same day, and he wouldn't take like a ceremonial bath between his wives. So there's no real there's nothing that prevents a man from actually going from wife to wife. Now, there is ceremonial impurity that can happen in particular cases. Major impurity is like after sex or for a woman after birth or during menstruation. So after birth, it's like 40 days until she's considered to be pure again after birth. Now, in the case of Miriam, I'm not really sure because the rules of Islam didn't apply back then, so I'm not really sure how it applies. But as Muslims in general, let me just throw this in there. We don't like a lot of negative talk about Miriam also. I've actually blocked guys on Twitter because they said, you know, Mary was cheating on her, you know, and it wasn't like an actual virgin birth. And I block guys over it because in Islam, she's like, she's holy people. It's like, what do you know, I'm over there and Allahu Akbar, you homie. So I just rather block them.
I think that's interesting because a lot of American Christians also don't know that Islam also regards Jesus very highly as well.
Yeah.
Right.
The second coming in the sense, not in the same sense as Christianity, but the second coming is supposed to happen in Islam also. Jesus is supposed to come back. Isa, as we call him, he's going to come back and he's going to fight the Antichrist, who we call the Dajjal. And the Muslims are supposed to, you know, and the Muslims and the Christians actually join forces to fight the forces of the Antichrist, because he's going to gather up a great army of disbelievers and it's going to be too strong of a force for the Christians, too strong of a force for the Muslims, and the Muslims and the Christians are going to unite, and they're going to fight together against the army of the Antichrist, and then there's going to be like another fight between us, unfortunately.
I was going to say, take that left behind.
Yeah.
Come on, Kirk Cameron, get your shit together.
So the major impurity. Sorry, I was about to finish that up. So major impurity is after sex also. So and then when a man and a woman both after sex, they cannot pray, they can't do the Islamic prayer, and they can't like read Quran either from the book itself or from memory or from your own speech. So then you have to take a shower to reach ritual purity again before you can commit like specific acts of worship, including fasting. So we do have this similarity to Judaism.
No, I appreciate that, brother, especially in defense of Mother Miriam, because I've even heard people, on different podcasts, they try to call Saint Joseph a cook. Oh, Mary got knocked up by some other dude's kid and he took care. Like, man, when people say that, the apologist in me just wants to come out.
Yeah, that's not on, man. I don't really like hearing that type of stuff. It's really
That's one thing we have in common. I appreciate that.
It's really easy to shut up about some things, and I don't really.
Now, I know since there's like a lot of different beliefs and such, Christianity has what 50,000 denominations.
3 major branches, about 40,000 denominations. Yeah.
Is there anything similar to that among Muslims, sort of like different schools? Like, how many would you say would be,
12,
I guess, the equivalent of denominations?
Not as many, though, right?
The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, I think he said Islam's going to break up into 73 sects. Right now, we have from the major groups, you have the Sunnis, the Sufis, and the Shia. And then amongst them, there's different groups that have different beliefs amongst them also. And so we have a lot of different groups. I'm from an unpopular group that we're called Celibes. We're like very orthodox in our understanding of Islam. And I call myself an eccentric one. I'm probably not the best example of one, but we have a very orthodox view of Islam. And so even though I guess I'm something of like a behavior hypocrite. If someone asks me something, I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of doing this, but dude, the rules say this. Don't really take me as an example. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as your example. And this is what the rules are. I'm kind of jacked up here, as Abuamerican. So, but my understanding is definitely Orthodox Islam and because of that, we don't get a lot of love. People don't like us. Yeah.
So Abu, I just wanted to say, like, for young men, you did talk about in terms of choosing your wife, you had some criteria.
Yeah.
Could you share maybe a couple of those points for maybe young men out there who, in their journey where they might, share some of that?
Dude, I got like 16 pages typed up on this already, and I'm not even like 1/4 finished. I'm like maybe 10. Okay, but in basic, the woman has to have like a considerable degree of religious, practice and understanding. That means for me, she has to be like a woman who covers or is absolutely willing to cover properly Islamically. She has to pray, she has to fast. She has to do the basics of Islam. To top it off, no male friends. This is just something that's not even allowed in Islam anyway. Islamically, this is absolutely forbidden. So, this is something that it's a modern day requirement that a woman cannot have no friends. And feminist ideology in general needs to be issued. She has no problems whatsoever with, standardized understanding of gender roles. So no feminist ideologies. That's the very basic fundamentals of my list. But I do go deep into each one of those categories, in what I'm writing on vetting.
Do you run into any of the cultural issues, like let's say homosexual friends with that kind of grady area, or it's just any man at all?
Dude, homosexuals, they don't get no love in Islam, man. Those guys,
that's true.
Why would you be having any friends with people that technically, if they don't leave it Islamically, there's some text that might infer, not directly, that they might need to be executed. Like, why would you be keeping friends with guys like that?
Well, I mean, some women do go out to work and they have to, they're confronted with that whether you like it or not, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big problem, especially in the UK and London, where you find like a lot of sisters working and they're in these mixed environments, and then a lot of the habits and ideas that don't really have an Islamic foundation get, embedded into their personality. And yeah, this is why I'm basically doing this entire vetting course for like Muslim men that are in situations like this. How do you filter this out? You know, can you filter it out of her personality and her behavior? And if not, then, you know.
Where does abortion and contraception come into play in Islam?
Impermissible. Abortion is absolutely, completely, and totally impermissible. It is unless there's a threat to the mother's life, if I remember correctly, abortion is completely impermissible. Contraception is the same. There has to be extenuating situation or reason on why you take contraceptives. Otherwise, there's a direct hadith saying have multiple children, have many children. There's a hadith saying to go out, you know, basically go forth and multiply. I mean, it's a command. It's not just like, you know, hey, just do it. It's a command. Like have many children.
So that's another interesting. I'm trying to see what we have, you know, in common, and maybe some of my panelists may disagree with me on that. But so Mother Miriam and no contraception. Those are interesting commonalities we have. Because you know Catholics get a lot of heat for that too, as far as not allowing contraception. That's baked into our dogma that it's not allowed. That's not to say that most people don't practice it and you know disobey that. But what is the reasoning behind that in Islam? Like when it comes to not allowing, you know, either hormonal or barrier or even withdrawal method.
I don't know. It's just a rule. Sometimes in Islam we just got rules and it's just like that. You know,
Sure.
You just, you know,
Wait,
one of the rules is hear and obey. This is a verse. I think it's a verse in the Quran. Someone in the chat. I think some of my guys are here. I think it's it is. Ati Allah wa ati Rasul. Obey Allah and obey His messenger. So sometimes there's just a rule and there's no real explanation given behind it. You just follow it. You know, one of those. You just got to believe things. You know?
So you're not? Are you allowed? Because you were mentioning Bobby about the different methods. Are you allowed to pull out in as a Muslim?
Yeah, you're allowed to do that. But it's her right. Islamically, it's seen as a woman's right to have a child. And I guess that's Islam recognizing that the average psychologically and emotionally healthy woman is going to want a child. If she doesn't want a child, then you should be looking at, you know, this is one of the things I put in my course. It's like she should have zero resistance to having children, you know. So you need to really look at that. Like, and if she is willing to have a child, but not your child, then you really need to look at that also.
Right.
You know. So
Awesome.
yeah, you're allowed to pull out, you know, but in general, it's, you know, contraceptive is like it's off the books.
Are you seeing a lot of backlash with young people now, young Muslim men coming up? In terms, is there like an unwanted pregnancy? Is there like teen pregnancy or anything like that that's kind of coming up with the new generation, or are they really holding to the traditions?
You find that a lot of people are holding to the traditions. You find it's a mixed bag, man. It's a mixed bag. The young generation, man, they're just we're in the age of social media, and social media is hypersexualized, and so you find like this is actually having a knockoff effect on them in general. I mean, so you do find that there's a sector of Muslims, especially the young ones, who can't keep it in their pants, you know. And I get on a lot of Muslim parents about this, and I'm like, they're like, oh, you need to wait to get married. You need to wait to get married. And I'm like, look, your kids in university, get them married to someone that's going to university with them, you know, or someone who's established, you know, because in Islam, we don't have like these great magnets. People like to bring this up, you know, the age of marriage in Islam, but we don't have this thing with like great age differences in Islam. You know, there's no problem with a 19-year-old being married to a 35, 40-year-old, you know, if they both agree to it. Yes. But nevertheless, she should get married. He should get married. Now, what we find is a lot of Muslim parents are sending their kids to the university. And what are universities? It's great big party screw fest, you know? and so like,
brainwashing camps, you know?
And I've had this discussion with more than one Muslim parent, you know, because a lot of these guys are in their 20s, and I go to their parents, and their parents are close to my age. And I'm like, look, man, you're telling your kid to wait to get married. I was like, and they're in their peak testosterone and estrogen phases, and there's nothing but hormones. They're just straight fat machines. I was like, so they need to get married. I'm like, you're telling this kid to wait, and you go in the next room in the middle of the night and bang your wife and your husband. You guys get your rocks off. But you're telling your kid who's at a higher hormonal rate in terms of reproduction than you are by far to wait? I mean, you nuts? What are you smoking? You know? And so it gets me in a lot of conflict with them, but it's a reality, and they don't want to face it. You know, it's my little baby. No, your little baby's got like the balls done dropped, man. You know, the hormones done hit her ovaries are screaming at, you know, dude over there. It's time to get married, you know?
I completely agree. That's an issue
There's-
that we've been discussing in our discussion as well, about men having those urges and the church
Right.
not really being able to respond to it. But totally agree, man.
Now, is there any laws on the differences in age?
You find it's customary and traditional that now that like almost every single Muslim country, except for like places like Afghanistan, that 18 is the age of consent. Basically, it's very
Well,
rare
I mean,
to find
more so the gap between the man and the woman.
No, there's no real rules on gaps. I'm 47 going on 48 this year. I've been talking to 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds that are interested in marriage up to 31, but less so 18 to 19-year-olds lately. But, it happens. And so there's no real rule between like age gaps in Islam. There's no rule. Basically, Islam's like when she hits the age of puberty, that's basically considered to be a woman, And so, but customary now is like wait till she's 18. But from an Islamic perspective, once puberty hits, that's considered an adult, both in men and women.
Does Islam have its own version of the wall for women? Is there a certain age where if a woman's not married or has kids by a certain age, is that looked upon with suspicion or skepticism or scorn? And what is that age?
Culturally, yes. Islamically, no. Not that I know
And
of. Islamically, there's nothing. But culturally, absolutely.
And what is that age? Like, what is that wall? That
like
cultural wall?
20s. A lot of cultures. This woman's a mess. She's done for. If she is like 28, 29, not married, you find like from Pakistanis to Arabs to Africans, they're like, what the hell is wrong with you? Why are you not married? And like there was actually a scholar, his name is Tawus. He said 2 things prevent the person from getting married: inability or sinfulness. So either you can't get married or you're out there doing something haram and screwing just left and right. So one of the two is your case, So generally it's frowned upon in overall. It's frowned upon to just stay unmarried.
I dropped in the private chat, but I'll just say it quick. The Jews have the Wailing Wall, so they got that.
It's a wall.
It's a wall.
It's got the word wall in it. We're good.
Well, you guys want to do a roundtable wrap up?
Yeah, I think we're on time, man. Yeah.
Any closing statements? Let's start with Corey.
Oh, geez. You shouldn't. Yeah, I think this is really interesting because, especially in like the U.S., talking about marriage and family dating, it's kind of like anything goes, right? So it's really interesting to like juxtapose that. That's my $10 word of the day, with how we're looking at the Islamic culture, which is very, it's strict, but it's also working, right? You know what I mean? Like, you guys are actually getting family systems and moving on and progressing. And honestly, I don't think, like, if we could time machine back to 700 AD, like, I think the family structure would still be pretty similar, right?
Yeah,
it's stood there. Your model has stood the test of time. Is basically what I'm trying to say. So it's very interesting to juxtapose that with America, where it's like anything goes. Lots of single moms, lots of polyandry is getting more popular. There's a lot of and it's interesting because when you're talking about your structures, Abuamerican, it's one dad, multiple moms with the kids mixed, and we're getting a lot of single moms where it's one mom and multiple dads, right, with their kids, and like how extremely different those families pan out. I think that's just something interesting we kind of went through here.
I think it's a shame, even though I'm Muslim, and I personally believe from like just an ideology perspective, everybody should be Muslim, but it's a shame that the West has walked away from Christian values in general. I think we see it now more than ever that the West is worse for it. They are poorer for it, because the reality is when you don't have any sort of religious ideology or structure in place, it becomes a free-for-all, and free-for-alls are ugly. It's just chaos, and that's what the West is seeing. There needs to be a return back to religion, but is it going to happen? And that's the question.
Yeah, probably not anytime soon. We'll probably need a couple more giant disasters. So, unfortunately, but my name's Conk. I got a YouTube. You can just Google Conk. My Twitter's @Vanguard Conk.
All the links are below, of course.
Yeah, we got all the links downstairs.
Bobby, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, firstly, I just us Catholics, man, we're really big on interreligious dialogue, ecumenism. It's interesting, like with Catholics and Protestants, when we dialogue and try to get a better understanding with each other, we call that ecumenism. But when it comes to people that are other religions, people who don't share faith in Christ as, Lord and Messiah that we Christians have, we call that interreligious dialogue. So I really appreciate conversations like this, Abu. I appreciate you coming on the show, man. Yeah, as you could tell, I was probably trying to, in a lot of my questions, I was trying to go for some commonalities, things we have in common. And I appreciate we got two, Mother Miriam and opposition to contraception. Was funny. I had this in my notes. I always end up over preparing for these shows because I treat it like guns. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it, when it comes to show notes. But what's funny is there was a quote of St. Augustine. Like, people think that the Catholic Church, didn't allow contraception, like Pope Paul VI invented that in the late 60s. Like, all the way back, there was a heretic that St. Augustine was debating. His name was Faustus. And he wrote this letter called Against Faustus. And in chapter 15, verse 7, this was around 400 AD, he talked about the conjugal aspect of marriage and like the procreative aspect. And he said, when this is taken away, husbands are shameful lovers, wives are harlots, bridal chambers are brothels, and father-in-laws are pimps.
Wow.
So, it's funny. It's interesting we have that in common, man. So I appreciate you coming on the show, and maybe we'll do a collab, sometime in the future.
Brooke?
Oh, wow. I mean, you gonna put me after Bobby after that speech, man? Abu, it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, I do come from a more Eastern Orthodox perspective, and I totally respect a lot of the things you're saying. And I agree. I think as human beings, as we do have these, these hormones, and we've got these issues and stuff like that. And having the spiritual ideals to appeal to something higher sometimes puts us in check. I know Rollo Tomasi would speak about how religion used to play the check against female hypergamy and all of these other things. And as you say, cultural decay and the age of decadence, as Amos likes to remind us, a lot of that's been wasted. A lot of that's been kind of pushed aside. And a very big part of why I enjoy doing these discussions is to remind people, there is still a voice out there. There are people still out there speaking these ideals of things that have personally helped us, that we would like to share for other people, that they could also be helped, if they're so inclined. So all I could say to you, my friend, is, thank you so much for coming on. Tell your mother you spoke to a Trinidadian today. And I look forward to having conversations with you in the future, my friend. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for, go ahead.
You mind if I drop something real quick? Just something for you guys and for your crowd. Something that we can universally use. There was a scholar, he gave a story of 3 different types of creation. I'll try to be as fast as possible. He said there was the angels, there's animals, and humans. Angels were given pure obedience. So they were giving obedience without free will. Animals were given absolute free will, and humans were given both. He said, so the man who follows his obedience, he doesn't follow his desires, and then he follows the rules that his Lord has given to him. Just apply your religion here. He says, then he is better than the angels, because the angels have not been given the option to fall victim to their desires. And the one who follows the desires and ignores his greater morals, then he's worse than an animal, because an animal has only been given desires and it hasn't been given the option. So you have that choice as a person. Make sure you have your ethics, virtues, values, and morals, and stick to them. Do not bend, because that separates you as a man from the animals. If you're just following your desires, and I know it's nice and it feels good, guys, what separates you from a cat on the street in heat or a dog out there in the street in heat? Make sure that you're actually being a human being.
Amen, man.
Amen. That's like meta frame. Yeah.
That reminds me of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux one time. He said that when we commit the sin of pride, when we commit the sin of lust, we sin as the beast, but when we commit the sin of pride, we sin as the angels. It kind of reminded me of that.
Well, of course, all the links are below. Now I got Abuamerican's website and his Twitter below. Is that all the links, or do you have other links as well?
No, that's it.
Okay, so I got those below. Go check him out, and of course, subscribe to all these other guys that are here. Since we're on this channel this week, Brooke and I are going to be doing our show, the Tanker Run podcast, right after this. But of course, thank you everyone for joining us. I guess, can I say it's the most halal episode we're having? So thank you for joining us. Of course, we will see everyone next week. I think we're going to be on Corey's channel, right? Yeah, we're going to be on Colin's channel
with
here.
Ryan Stone.
Ryan
Yes,
Stone's
we are.
coming on.
So
Yeah,
we will see everyone next week.
See you guys.
Thanks for watching,
Great show.
everyone.